In this video, we're going to be building a handler factory function in order to delete review documents, but also documents from all the other collections, all with one simple function. So as I mentioned right at the beginning of this section, adding very similar handlers to all of our controllers will create a lot of duplicate code, right? Because all these update handlers, or all these delete handlers, or all these create handlers, they really all just look basically the same, right? Also, imagine that we wanted to change like some HTTP status code or status message. Then we would have to go into each and every controller and then change all the handlers in there. And so instead of manually writing all these handlers, why not simply create a factory function that's going to return these handlers for us? So a factory function is exactly that. It's a function that returns another function, and in this case, our handler function. So for deleting, for creating, for updating, and also for reading resources, okay? And I know that this whole concept can be a bit complex to wrap your head around. And that's the reason why I left this for the later part of this course. But now I believe that you're actually ready to implement this kind of stuff. So this kind of logic is what every advanced JavaScript developer should be able to implement. And so again, I believe that at this point in the course, you're really ready to start using advanced concepts like these. Alright, but enough talk, let me now show you how it actually works by using the delete handler as a first example. Alright, and so actually we have one in the Tor controller, and so let's go ahead and copy that one. So delete Tor. Okay, so I copied it basically as a template for us to follow, right? So let's create a new file, and I'm going to do that in the controllers. All right. So handler factory.js. Okay, and I'm doing this in the controllers folder, well, because the functions that we're going to write here will basically return controllers. And so for me, it makes a lot of sense that we put them here. All right, so let's just copy this part here just to keep it as a reference. So again, the goal here is to basically create a function which will then return a function that looks like this one here, but of course not only for the tour, but for every single model that we have in our application and that we might have in the future. So this function needs to be prepared for that. And so what that means is that inside the factory function, we will pass in the model. All right. So let's call this one delete one. All right, and it's called like this, again, because this function is not only going to work to delete tours, but also to delete reviews and users. And in the future, some other documents that we might also have. All right, so as I was saying in the beginning, we will pass the model into this function. So we pass the model, and then we create a new function. And that function will right away then return our async function. Okay, so basically all of this. So our async handler function. Okay, and so now all we need to do is to actually change from the specific tool model to the more generic model. All right, then here we will also change this from tour to just document, because again, we will not know what kind of document this is. So this function will not really know if it is a tour or if it's a review or a user. Okay, and so we need to take the tour out of all of this. Okay, and that's actually it. So this is basically the generalization of this specific function, which worked only for tours, and now this new one works for every model, right? What we also need to do here is to import this catch async and also this app error. So catch async and I believe it's in the utilities folder, and then not app error, but catch async. All right, then duplicate this here, app error, and this here is uppercase. Give it a save, and we're now ready to actually test this out. All right, so this is how it's going to work. First of all, we need to import that handler factory. And so let's say, and I'm simply going to call it factory here. All right. So require, and it's in the same folder, so handler factory. All right. And so let's comment this one here out, or actually not all of this. Yeah, or actually, yeah, we can comment it out. And so the new exports.delete tour will be factory.delete one, and then pass in the model, which is tour. And that's it. That's all we need to do. So just to recap very quickly here. So we call this delete one function. Okay, then in there we pass the model. And so what's going to happen is that this function will then right away return this handler function that we had before. Okay, simply the specific model, which before was the tour, is now going to be replaced with the one that we passed into the function. Okay, and by the way, this works because of JavaScript closures, which is just a fancy way of saying that this inner function here will get access to the variables of the outer function even after the outer function has already returned. All right. So calling this function here will then return another function, which will then sit here and wait until it is finally called as soon as we hit the corresponding route. Okay. And so let's now try exactly that. So delete tour. Okay. And let's choose a tour that we don't really need here for now. So let's say, well, let's say here there's no adventure because it also doesn't have any reviews. So let's send that. Oh, and now we don't have permission to perform the action. And that's because we're not logged in as an admin. So let's try that. And so this is the admin that we need to be logged in. Okay, so that's done. And so now this should work. And indeed, it did work. And so that's proof that our factory function is really doing its job. Okay, because if we now come back here, we had 10 results. And so now we should only get 9. So perfect. And now the goal is to be able to use this in each and every single controller. So let's copy this here and go to the reviews. Oh, and of course we need it up here, right in the beginning. All right. And so now exports.delete review is equal to factory.delete one with the review model. And that's it. That's all we need to do in order to implement the delete handler. Now, of course, we also need to specify the route handler. Now, of course, we also need to specify the route itself. And so let's do that here as well. So router.route, because here we actually need the ID parameter, right? And now delete is simply review controller.delete review. All right. And I'm not messing with the permission here, neither with authentication, because for now I just want to make this work and worry about that stuff a bit later in the section. Okay. So let's close this stuff up here. Okay. So get all reviews. All right. Let's save this and this one as well. So that now we can start with a blank sheet here. And let's just start by getting all reviews so that we can now delete one. Okay. And so let's delete, well, just this one. Okay. Okay. Now we also need, of course, this. and then the delete HTTP method. Okay, we need no authorization at this point, so let's just send it. And indeed, no content, so 204. And if we now get all the reviews, then we should be back to having just 3. Yep, that works. And so let's move on to the next one. Okay, so reviews. Let's get this line of code here, and now finally add it to the user controller as well. All right. And of course, all of this, I understand it's a bit confusing now, messing with all of these different files, but we just need to do it once, and then we're done with all that confusion. Okay, so here we already had the exports.delete user. Now all we need to do is to then call our factory function. So delete one, and then the user, right? Now only the administrator should later be able to actually delete users, okay? Because remember that when the user deletes himself, then they will not actually get deleted, but only active will be set to false. But the administrator, on the other hand, is really going to be able to delete the user effectively from the database. But again, we're going to worry about that permission stuff a bit later, okay? For now, let's check in the user routes if the route is actually implemented, and yeah, it is down here. And so since we now implemented this, let's also test it here again, also on Postman. So first, let's save this one. So delete review. And now let's simply copy this into yet another route. So delete, and then one user, but I'm actually not really going to do it now. All I want is to just get some random ID, okay? Or actually, let's just create a new user. So basically sign up, and then delete that one right away. So hello, like this. Get all users, and then it's this guy here, and so let's delete him right away. So we send, we get 204, no content, and of course now he should be gone. Now if we try this here again, so basically trying to delete a user that is no longer there, we should get an error. So let's take a look, and indeed no document found with that ID. And so this means that in our factory function, so right here, all of this, the app error and the catch async, all of that is still intact. So everything still works just the same as before. And so that was also important to test here. Okay, let's just quickly save this here as well. So each and every single endpoint that we're implementing, I'm also adding it here into Postman, because a bit later, we will then actually be able to create some API documentation based on all of this that we have saved here in Postman. So that's yet another very handy feature of this application. So we have to delete the current user, and again that's different from just deleting the user, because this one here is for administration and this one is for the currently logged in user. So very different. Okay. So this was our first factory function, only for deleting and only for you to understand the concept itself. Next up, we're then going to implement factory functions for updating and for creating documents.